And you know, I spend my life traveling around looking at technologies and startups and how they're using it. And MindTech is one of the most interesting. And it's not just interesting in terms of what's happening today, it's really interesting where we're going with this technology. And I'll tell you, it's going to be right now, most of the MindTech apps I see are nice to have, but not absolutely necessary. And as you know, when I say a product is nice to have, I mean that startup is dead. Nobody buys a product that's nice to have. We all buy products that we really, really want. It's our money, you know? We have to want the product like crazy to get over the hurdle of spending money. We're nice to have, oh, that's pretty cool, and then you don't buy it. It's nice to have, but where we're going with MindTech is going to really change everything. And I'm going to go into that, and some of the ideas I'm going to talk about here are ideas that are way out in the future. But I want to get you thinking. I want to stimulate possibility. So we're going to talk not about what's possible today. We're going to talk about what's probable, a lot of it, what's probable in the future. And that means I don't know if it'll happen. A lot of the technology isn't quite there yet, but it's likely to happen, either in the way I'm going to describe or in a similar way. So let's talk about our brains, first of all. So, you know, we are stuck, for better or worse, with the same brains that our prehistoric ancestors had when they lived in caves. So, you know, 100,000 years ago, you know, our brains really haven't changed that much. There was a big advance when our brains changed, and we went from being basically monkeys and evolved into sapiens, and eventually into Homo sapiens. And for those of you who know, there have been many types of sapiens. All the other ones died off. There are also Neanderthals and other species like that. But our big advancement was when our brains enlarged, so that we could have larger brains. And actually, that larger brain required a lot of energy, and forced, in order to feed our larger brains, we had to learn to cook food. Cooking fire and cooking food was the way, the first big innovation we had as a human race. But our brains are the same as like 100,000 years ago, which is surprising. But look at our world. So our world has changed dramatically compared to our ancestors, but our same brains are so adaptable that we can use them in an entirely different world. So most people don't understand how pliable and plastic our brains are. And this is going to play a huge role in brain technology, as I'll get into later. So right now, if you're familiar with BCI, BCI stands for Brain-Computer Interfaces. There are lots of people developing them. The versions we have now are kind of crude. They can measure brain waves. This is one of our startups from Korea. It's called SOSO. And they've come up with a pretty advanced one that they sell all over the world. It's very popular in Japan and Asia, and we're helping them bring it to the US. We set them up in China at their top university there with funding. This technology basically, a lot of what they can do with this is measure concentration. So how deeply is somebody concentrating on something? And through that concentration, they can provide feedback. So they have lots of apps, learning apps on tablets, like an iPad and Android tablets, where you interact with it, and it can sense that you're concentrating or not, and adjust the application accordingly. Now they've come up with applications for kids with ADHD, attention deficit hyper disorder, where they can't focus, and without drugs, they can actually get them to engage, which is really nice. And so they've been experimenting with this. They've also just been using them for regular students in school as a way to increase their concentration and the rate at which they learn. They are applying this technology to post-traumatic stress disorder right now, and other stress disorders, giving you biofeedback and helping you relax and control your brain. And these are kind of the first wave of applications. There's a number of companies out there that are using EEG. It's a non-invasive technology that reads your brainwave. And there's applications for this. You can see he's wearing an EEG helmet for entertainment, medical, education, all across the board. People are experimenting now with games. You can actually, if you concentrate, control a cursor on the screen. It's still difficult. It requires too much work to really be practical. But it's interesting that people can do that. Like just by thinking, you can control things with a relatively simple device. They have actually, in laboratories now, developed technology to read dreams. So there are many scientists working on this, and you wonder, how could they read your dream? How could they know what you're dreaming of? Well, one way that they found is kind of what I call the brute force way. So they will sit down with you and show you lots and lots and lots of images. And they will look at the pattern. You know, your brain lights up. The neurons light up. They'll look at the pattern that forms in your brain, what parts are activated, and they will map that into a database correlating to this image. So if you see pictures of dogs and cats and people you know, faces you know, and places you've been, they map them into this database. If they get enough of these images in a database, then when you're dreaming, they are sensing, are we getting matches, right? Is the pattern in your brain matching what's in our database? Oh, we know what you're dreaming of. And they can actually put together a movie of these images and show it back to you, and then the dream will come back. You know how when you get a prompt, the dream comes back to you? You will start to remember a dream that you forgot, which is kind of a first step in reading dreams, because technically they are reading your dream. And you imagine, with today's computing power and storage, the ability eventually to map every brain state you have, correlating to every image you see, because literally if you walked around with a device on your head that had a camera and took a picture of everything you were doing, and that device could also record what states your brain was in, you would have over time, a complete map of everything correlated to a database. And then, when you dreamt at night, it could perfectly match it. So even that brute force way, and they'll probably come up with more sophisticated algorithms in the future that won't require that, but even in that brute force way, you could technically recreate your dreams while you sleep. And you know, it's fascinating. I think a lot of us, yes, you can ask questions as we go.
I was curious, how is your brain registering the same pattern when you see the same things? You're thinking about two totally different things.
So that's a good question. So it wouldn't be perfect. If you, your brain has all these different patterns that it lights up according to different experiences, emotions, images, verbal cues. I'm sure they would change when you're dreaming. They wouldn't be identical, but I imagine what the scientists are doing is they're approximating. They're saying if it's in this range, we assume it's a close enough match. But it's never going to be probably an exact match, but it will be similar. Close enough for them to... They've done the tests, and they've shown people the pictures, and the people have actually said, yes, that is what I was dreaming of. So they confirmed it. So it is working. Does that answer your question? Okay. But that's where we're headed. And I think we're going to get more and more sophisticated with how we do this. But remember, we're at the very beginning of this brain technology. So now I want to talk a little about brain chips. This is where it gets really exciting. They're actually developing chips now specifically to insert into the brains of people and animals. And they've already done this in laboratories where they have implanted a chip, a wireless chip, into the brain of a monkey that had a spinal injury. And they implanted electrodes further down the spine past the injury, so the monkey couldn't walk, it was paralyzed. Its spine was severed here. But they implanted electrodes here, and then the monkey's muscles would connect directly to those electrodes, and they would wirelessly transfer that information to the brain. Well, within a very short time, the monkey could walk again. It figured out, oh, I'm getting signals from my legs. Oh, wow, okay. And then it interpreted those signals, and it just started to walk again. It's amazing. So you imagine people with, who are paralyzed, they thought for life, may not be paralyzed now. Now they want to try this in humans, so they just started in animals, and it's working. Yes?
Where is this happening?
I don't remember.
Huh?
I didn't write it down, so.
Country or?
This is the U.S.
Oh, US.
Yeah, but it's happening around the world, this type of research. But I didn't write down every source, sorry. I could look it up later. Or you can get on the web and Google it. I try to keep my slides simple. So a lot of times I put more and more information, and then the slides are hard to read. So it's kind of a balance between keeping simple slides, but not having all the information up there. So they've done an even more amazing experiment where they've had monkeys. They've implanted a wireless chip in their brain. And you can see this monkey is contained in a box, right? Now, just by thinking, the monkey learns not to control its own legs, but to control an actual robotic arm. And it learns, because it's hungry, to feed itself with the arm. So it could think, I want food, and it figured out, oh, I can actually, by thinking, move this, and in a very short time, it could actually pick up food and begin to feed itself. It's even more amazing. And if you think of the applications, oh, I want to go one step further. They did another experiment beyond that, where they had the monkey, again in the box, right? But on an electric wheelchair. And with the chip in its brain, just by thinking, it could start to drive itself around. So it figured, oh, I can control this. So, the amazing thing is, if a monkey can do these things, as a human being, today, if I got that chip in my brain, I'd be able to turn off and on the lights. I'd be able to not use this pointer. I could just think, next slide. I could do all sorts of things just by thinking. This technology is here right now. It works. And you're saying, will they use it in humans? Who would get a brain chip here? You would? Okay, we got some very brave people. Oh, all of you. Wow. Usually when I go to audiences, nobody wants to raise their hand.
I get it after them.
What?
I get it after them.
Okay, you're gonna. You go second. You wait for version 2.0. I think I'd go for version 2.0 also.
Yeah.
Maybe 3. Oh yeah.
Quick question though, has there been any study about long-term effects of Wi-Fi in the brain though?
Yeah, I mean, we're even, California came out with a study about cell phones, holding it next to your head, and they recently warned against it. That's been out for 20 years, right? But most people ignored it, but now they think it might be real. It might cause brain tumors. So there's real concern about cell phone radiation, about Wi-Fi, any sort of transmitter right next to your brain. And we're just talking next to your head, and there's a skull in between there, right? But if it's directly implanted in your brain, absolutely. There will be concerns. So maybe you don't want to get 1.0.
The whole idea, I'm sure it's neat to turn on and off the lights, but if somebody can get into your brain, there's no telling what else they're going to do.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later, okay? That's later in the presentation. You're skipping ahead. But let me tell you who will get this. So people with severe disabilities. So if you have a severe disability, and you cannot control parts, like Stephen Hawking, right? He's trapped in the wheelchair. He can't control, he can't even talk very well. But if this device will actually restore a lot of your function, give you a much higher quality of life, then the risk of even like a brain tumor or the strangeness of having a chip in your brain becomes a risk worth taking. And there's a company in the Bay Area right now called Kernel that is developing these chips. So the founder is passionate about it. It's a serial entrepreneur. He's put all his money into it, and he believes that this is the future. So you could see in the future, a person who's disabled can feed themselves, isn't reliant upon somebody else. A person who has potentially Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease can function at a higher level than they were before. In this case, I think most people would accept, oh, yeah, it's worth getting this chip. Like, my life is like not, my life is deteriorating. If I can function again, I will take that risk. And over time, a lot of the problems with, potential radiation or even having a chip long-term in your brain, we don't know what that does, right? Scar tissue, things like that, those will become less. We will work out those issues. Where it gets, it's kind of grotesque, and you can see this, I put Duke University, but these are universities all over the world that are doing this research. They have put a wireless chip in the brain of a rat. Now, what's amazing about this experiment that blew me away, right, and really opens up the potential is, alludes to what you were talking about, is that they did an experiment where they had one rat, and they taught it how to do all these different things in order to get food. They can train rats to go through mazes and do all these things in order to get food. It took them a couple weeks to train the rat how to do that. Over and over, they had to train it, and it learned, okay, that's how I get food dispensed to me. Then they hooked that rat up. Well, the rat had this in its head, and then they connected that rat through the internet to another rat in another city. And they put that rat in the same situation, and the rat instantly could figure out how to get food. So what they did, which was totally amazing if you think about it, they transferred knowledge from one living mind to another. Wow, that's big, right? Like, that's where we're talking, wow, if they could do that, it's still in the very early stages, crude stages, but wow, if you could transfer knowledge from one mind to another, even simple knowledge like that, then you have the potential to do a lot.
Memories, personality.
Everything.
Yeah.
So the U.S. military, DARPA, is now spending a lot of money on new cyber helmets. And these helmets are designed to interface directly with the brain. So you can imagine, they'll have a heads-up display in them like Google Glass or any of these augmented reality things that will overlay stuff. But they want it, their goal is beyond that. So their goal is to have an interface where the person can just think and start to communicate so that they don't have to, they're using their hands, they're running around, it's the middle of a firefight. They don't really have time to fiddle with communicating. So what they want to do is they actually want to take incoming data from that soldier and put it up into the cloud and then share and then have algorithms decipher all the information coming from everybody on the battlefield and then start to direct the troops in real time. So saying, their enemy is over here, showing everybody. I want you to move there, I want you to move there, I want you to do this. And eventually, in the wars of the future, that could all be done by algorithms, not even humans, because humans are too slow. And a human couldn't absorb all the information coming from all these, coming from 50 different soldiers at once on a battlefield and coordinate each one. That would be impossible for a human to do. But for a cloud-based AI that tapped directly into the brain with two-way feedback, it would be possible. So, as you all know, DARPA invented the internet. This is where they're going next. And they're working on it. They haven't figured it all out, but they have versions now that are kind of version 0.1, right? Just beginning. And they'll get more and more sophisticated over the coming years. Brain to internet. So we already saw that scientists can take knowledge from one rat and transfer it over the internet to digitize it and transfer it over the internet to another rat. So imagine your brain, we all carry around these phones now. Everybody's also talking about augmented reality. Magic Leap has, they're finally about to come out with their promised AR unit. Those are still clunky. Like even Magic Leap, their AR unit is big, and if you look at Microsoft's, unit, their AR device and all these VR devices, they're really big. And Magic Leap's is smaller and portable, but it's not something you'd want to walk around with. Most people aren't. The best interface, my rule, and I've been very skeptical about VR and AR, simply because they're such clunky units. But my rule is for most tasks, you have to beat this. And this is a darn easy device to use and very versatile. You know, you whip it out of your pocket, instantly you can check your social network. Instantly you can send a message. Instantly you can check stocks, you can, do, all these different transactions, buy stuff. Another device has to be as handy as the phone. And if it's not, it's always going to lose. Because people will just use the phone. And so a lot of people have been coming out with applications for VR and AR, but you can't expect people to, it's hard to navigate, it's hard to get into. But if you start to combine that with the brain could be potentially easier to use than this. You think of something and then it's automatically feeding you that information. Oh, I want to leave now. Okay, I'm ordering a Lyft for you or an Uber. Oh, I want to eat now. Oh, here are the restaurants. This is what you liked last time. Pick one. No, I want Mexican food. Oh, here's the Mexican. Yelp in your head. All these. So there will come a point, I guarantee it, where they will be developing applications for the brain. So we will either have chips in our brain or devices that are non-invasive, if that technology becomes sophisticated enough, that we can just wear behind our ear, that will actually allow us to communicate. If you think about, if I think of a word, I say that word in my head. So when we speak, we talk to ourselves. Now, in the same way we talked about the dream recording technology, you can actually build up a database of every word, which is much simpler, right? Because unlike pictures change every time you think of them in your mind, but a word is the same. So I can think of Mexican food. We could very easily have the entire dictionary mapped into a database with your brain states and read them. So everything you think about, then these advanced algorithms that we have now already, for like Google Translation and IBM Watson, they can easily begin to decode this. So if you're a startup thinking about this, wow, that's a very interesting application. Yes?
But everyone's brain is different when you look at the same image, and how could that be?
They just personalize it. You know how you can teach voice recognition to know your personal voice?
Oh, that's true.
Right, you just talk. And the more you think, and you can correct it if it's wrong, within a matter of weeks, it can start to understand your patterns pretty well. Yeah, so you'd start wearing it, and it's a good investment if you think about it. It's a great interface. I want this, I want that, and it just happens. I don't think people would mind training it for a lifetime of using it. Yes?
What differentiates one person from the other if they all have access to the same data pool? Like essentially everyone shares the same knowledge if they want to.
Then we start to get into philosophical, which we will. I'll do that. That comes a little later. But it's a really good question. So save that question and we'll go deep on that.
Sure.
Because right now I'm just talking about a little, we're starting to go into the science fiction here, but I think it's the near future, not, within our life, most of our lifetimes, we will see this type of technology, especially what I talked about, mapping words that you say in your head to a database through a device that can recognize the patterns. You can almost do that right now. And that can be a big opportunity. So the next step, which gets really cool, is not you can just upload, right? That's all uploading. Basically, if you say a word in your head, like I want Mexican food, it understands it, it calls an app, and you're delivered Mexican food to eat at your doorstep. Or you're on, think about I'm out of toilet paper. Okay, here's the toilet paper. Amazon's shipping it to you. It's on its way. You don't have to. Amazon knows you're out of toilet paper. The next step is, can you actually start to download information? And as we saw with the rat, it seems possible that this can be done, that you can actually download information directly into your brain. The beauty of this is it starts to get really, really interesting. Education. Do you have to go to a university and spend years or 12 years up through high school and then 4 to 8 years in a university studying to learn something, or can we simply download stuff on demand that we need to know? Oh, I need to know, how to speak Spanish. Download Spanish into your brain, and all of a sudden you start to know how to speak Spanish without ever going to class. Mental telepathy. So right now we communicate by talking or typing, but in the future, if I think of a thought, and this is also possible if people have these, if we can download information, communicate it, you could think of words. They can be put up in a database. Those words can then be shared with somebody you direct it to. So you can instant message with people, in essence, have a conversation. You could be around the world, and in our heads, we can literally be talking to each other. I don't think this might not be that far away. Because I think the technology is here now to read all the words in our head and compile a dictionary. And then if we start thinking, somebody around the world in China or somewhere else could all of a sudden be on their phone, and you could just type those out on their phone in an instant messenger. And they could even instant message and it comes back to you. But you could do it instead of talking, which is awkward. It's awkward to talk when you're in a room that's crowded, other people are around. You could just do it by thinking. And it just gets more and more bizarre. Share memories.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For the last one, for mental telepathy, if that was to happen, like, wouldn't you run into the problems with self-built dictionaries of your own? So interpretation of, like, the words that somebody else is saying, like, wouldn't that, like lose a lot of, like, what you're trying to come across to?
Well, we know words in context, right?
Yeah.
So, like when you talk to me, I don't know what you're thinking of when you say home. You might have an image in your head and a feeling of what you mean, but I don't know that. But you're used to communicating to me in a way that lets me understand what you mean by your version of home. Now, you'd have your own dictionary, your own brain states that map to your database. I would have mine that map to mine. You wouldn't see mine and I wouldn't see yours. It would just take that word, put it over into my database, and then give me the information in the way I can absorb it.
Okay.
So you wouldn't need to understand how I process or what my brain states are. All that is in the cloud. It's just two databases, and what's transferred are just what we normally transfer. I'm talking to you. You would just get my words. So the words are the commonality between them all.
Okay.
And so yes, it can work without any problem. And I think it's like amazing, right? The potential. And we're just, now we go, words are simple, right? Words are, which is great. But, could you transfer images? Yes, we see that will be possible. And then the next step is, could you transfer whole memories, like pieces of your life to somebody else? That gets really bizarre. So, if I could transfer something I experienced to you, I could even do it in real time potentially. So I'm going skydiving tomorrow. You're afraid to go? Just tap into my brain. You can go with me. But it's not real for you, but it will be real while you're experiencing. Or you could go back into my past and take my memories and actually potentially live them out in your head, just like you would a dream. Yes?
Which brings me to a question.
Yeah.
It seems like there is potential for security breaches.
Yes, I'll get to that. That's an upcoming slide. It's a big deal. So I will get to that. You're correct. So sharing memories gets even more bizarre the more you think about it. Because, our life is our memory, right? This is us, who we define as ourselves, are all these experiences we have. Suddenly, if we start to merge that with other people, who are we? Once I can access your memories, well, I'm kind of part of you. And your memories, and you would have identity crisis. It would be very, very strange. And how do I interpret your memories? I would never interpret them exactly how you did. What does that mean? Lots of questions now.
Also, you're focusing on things like conversations about homes and skydiving, all this rosy fun stuff.
Yeah.
But our heads are dark, dark places. About 80% of our thoughts are negative.
Okay.
And also repetitive.
Okay, yeah.
So, if you think what we're seeing now with the Me Too movement and stuff like that,
Yeah.
we're all sharing our thoughts all the time.
Yeah.
That's going to be a joke. It's going to make Me Too look like kids playing in the sandbox compared to what we're really thinking.
Yeah, it could be,
So-
yeah, it might not be that much fun to be in somebody else's head.
What we're doing about racism now, boy, that's going to
What?
be a joke. Things like all the racism and the
Yeah.
fear and stuff like that that's happening in our country, it's going to look like child's play compared to what happens if we're all in each other's heads all the time.
We don't know what will happen. It'll be an experiment. We don't know if it'll make us all feel better or worse. It's hard to imagine what it would be like to be in somebody's head. I mean, the closest you can come is when you empathize with somebody and you're sitting there and you're hearing their story. You kind of get into their head in a way, and you get to really know them. But having all these input sources, it's hard to tell, right? How it will affect. It may bring us all together in a way that we can't imagine, a really good way, right? Where we start to all feel the commonality and maybe break down some of the barriers of racism and other things. Or it could be the
Worse,
opposite,
yeah.
right?
Hive mind. That's sort of the idea, right?
What?
A hive mind.
Hive mind. It could be, it's hard for us to, I mean, none of us can really know, but we can speculate on what it would be. Yeah, it could be very dark, very...
You just look at the internet, people feel safe hidden behind their code names or whatever, handles,
Yeah.
whatever you call them, and all the badness comes out, so why is it gonna be any different if we're putting words in each other's heads?
I don't know. I actually don't know if it'll be good or bad. I just don't want to say it will be all bad.
Well, not everybody behave like you describe.
You just see so much badness.
And maybe there'll be
going
people
on.
who are, there's some people who are just naturally optimistic and happy. I know these people. I'm not one of them who's happy every minute of my life. But there are people who are. Maybe we'll all pay to tap into their brain. We'll be like, yeah, I want that. Yes.
Oh no, I just wanted to piggyback. I mean, for me, I feel like the inevitability of some of this is only like a question of when, because of the convergence of like these different, like developments of materials like graphene now make new things possible. Like, which
I think a lot of this will happen, right?
Yeah.
And it may happen in the way I'm laying out here. It may be a little different. We can't really tell.
But what I was getting at
Yeah.
is like, really it's for us, it's sort of like fire, we can create or destroy, right? Technology makes for a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. And it's a bit like a child, we spawned it, it's here, we can't tell it what to do, but we can influence the technology, right?
We can.
To be like a good child, not, a demon.
That's one of the reasons I called this talk Neosapiens, New Sapiens, because it's going to fundamentally change how we look at ourselves as human beings. We will never be the same once this technology comes. We just won't be the right now. I can empathize with somebody, and if you're upset, right? I can feel badly for you, but I'm only feeling what I feel. I could never feel your pain. I could never know what you've really been through. But with the technology, potentially, I could actually feel your pain. Like I would feel your pain, and that would become my pain. Or your happiness would become my happiness. How will that change us? Who will we give access? What permissions will we have? These are all questions that we're going to have to grapple with, which are like amazing, right? Right now we give people permissions to view certain of our, our tweets, or, well, not tweets, but more like Facebook and all this stuff. Yeah, but in the future, it may be emotional permission, right? There's this whole architecture of emotional architecture that we control, and brands, what will they offer us? Will they offer us to feel good if we like their product? Will we be able to download like happy emotions? Will we be able to rewrite bad memories? Oh, you've had, you were abused, or you were in a war, and you're suffering from that. Even now they've experimented with rewriting memories. It is possible, even today, to reprogram people's minds. With technology, you could specifically edit your thoughts and actually cut out stuff you don't like and reprogram your mind to be happier. It's really, really bizarre, once you start to go down this path. Yeah, you had a question.
Yes, I was wondering, are you aware, are there any clinical studies on any of these projects, or at least any kind of feedback from FDA on any of this?
So it's just beginning. So there is on the earlier stuff I showed you. Those are all real experiments happening now. What we're talking about at this point, no. I mean, I doubt it.
So there's no studies on people yet?
Not that I've seen, and I don't know, right? I haven't spent 20 years researching this. It just fascinated me when I started to go down, when I started to think about the possibilities of technology in this direction. And so I don't know. I would imagine if I were a professor right now, a researcher, in neuroscience, I'd be doing this. I love it, right? It's really fascinating. But they have to figure out how to even test this, because what we're doing is hypothesizing about what could be a possible future. How do you test that now? How do you design an experiment to actually gather data on that? And a lot of smart people, as this becomes more and more possible and real, will begin to do that.
I see.
Yeah. Yes?
Yeah, for this as an ecosystem to finally arise, there needs to be all the right pieces in place
Yes.
to curate that perfect storm. So I'd be curious to hear you sharing later on, like, what are the key components you think? I mean, from an
Well, so a
investment
lot of them are
perspective.
being laid out right now, the cloud, right? AI, massive amounts of AI powered on these big platforms like Watson and Google and Baidu and Alibaba, and all these big companies are these huge AI platforms that they're building out.
Yeah.
For the computing power to actually process these
Right.
signals. Storage is all out there. The area they are starting to do the non-invasive brain reading technology,
Right.
as well as the invasive. So once all those pieces come together, and we already have the wireless technology. So really the biggest impediments to this are how do you read the brain waves, either non-invasively or invasively, right? How do you insert chips into people's heads or put something outside your head that can read your brain waves? And how can we make that a two-way communication and refine that process? And we still don't understand a lot about the human brain. There's a lot we don't, I mean, I've read a lot of books on it, but we're still figuring out, how marvelous our brains really are. I'll go a little more into that as I go further, but our brains are really adaptable, they're really malleable. There's a lot more our brains can do than we even imagine. So I'm going to go a little further. So we all know when we're in a dream, we have a dream, and that dream is real. And when we're in that dream state, it feels like we're really living it, even though bizarre things are happening and everything else. And I don't know, have any of you ever consciously controlled your dreams? Okay, one. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I used to be able to do that. Now I got too busy because it takes effort. But you can do that. You can become aware in your dreams. It's possible. All you have to do is every night before you go to bed, ask yourself, am I dreaming? Am I dreaming? Am I dreaming? Am I dreaming? And try to fall asleep that way. And then when you fall asleep, there's a good chance in your dream you'll say, am I dreaming? And then suddenly you'll realize you are. And two things will happen. Either you wake up because you freak out, or but once you get used to it, and I was able to do this, you can do anything in your dreams. It's like absolutely amazing. I'd be conscious in my dreams and I'd say, I want to fly now, and I could fly. And it would just be absolutely amazing. I could bring up people, and they would come and I'd be able to chat with them. I could go up to a wall in my dreams, and I'd be putting my hand against the wall, and I wouldn't be able to push it through, and I'd say, wait a second, this is a dream. I know I can push my hand through the wall. It's like the Matrix, right? But I couldn't. And then eventually, I could. Right? I made myself able to do that. And it was this big struggle back and forth. But it's marvelous. We can get to that state where, because dreams, you can visualize everything. You can bring up photorealistic imagery in your head, and you create it in real time. Now, the thing that people don't understand is most people think that our eyes are like movie cameras. Like what we're really seeing in the world is what is really there. But if you ask any magician or any neuroscientist, they will tell you that what you're actually seeing isn't what's really there. Our eyes are not movie cameras. What we're doing is we're compositing the information and recreating it in our head. So everything you're seeing is not like a video stream. It's something actually being created in your head. It is virtual reality. Now they've done this, they know this, because they do experiments. And when a person thinks something is there, it will be there, even though it's not there. So magician, when you think a ball is there or something or isn't there, you will either edit it out or put it in. And you won't even know. And that's how they trick you. Like because they lead you to believe it's there and you think it's there when it's really not. Now, we do this all the time. we are actually putting stuff in. That's why eyewitness reports are so unreliable. The first time you see it, you're not really seeing it. You're compositing it all together. And then each time you retrieve that memory, you aren't retrieving like a video recording, which is identical. You are recreating that whole scene. And that's why everything's changing. You can actually see another face on the person because somebody told you, no, that guy was more like this. And then you said, oh, yeah, he had hair. I thought he had, and then the person has more hair than they really have. And you start to finger somebody who didn't really do the crime. If you go into your past, people have been, they've had false memories. And they can actually implant false memories in people by hypnosis. And because what they're doing is they're creating those, every time you bring up a memory, you're creating it. And all you have to do is bring what you created into your mind and make it real. And suddenly, that false memory becomes as real to you as any real memory. Now, it's kind of scary, but that's how our brains work. And what I'm saying is that the idea of VR and a clunky helmet, or even a contact lens and AR, we might not need that. We might be able to overlay in the real world, just like if you're on acid, LSD, these images are coming up and you're overlaying monsters and stuff or whatever you're thinking of. In the real world, hallucinations, we're capable of doing that. We're capable of creating complete VR, AR right in our head. And with this technology, could we do that? Well, potentially, as we learn how to stimulate the brain in certain ways, we could directly feed into your brain images, and then we are all living, we would all be living in this world that is it's already the world that's being created in our head, but then to a greater degree, we could be inserting, that ping pong table could be edited out. As long as I don't walk into it, it's fine. There could be pictures on the wall, screens on the wall that aren't really there projecting stuff. All this stuff could be happening in our heads. And you can imagine application developers for this new type of brain VR would be a huge business, right? We would never need a phone or any device because we'd need whatever device was connected to our head, because whatever we do, we could do there, and we could even give ourselves feedback. You could even, when you touch the phone, feel it even though it's not there. And you say, well, how is that possible? How can you feel something that isn't even there? And I will tell you, people have lost their limbs, in a war or accidents, and then they have what's called a phantom limb. They actually still feel like the arm is there, because that whole arm has been mapped into a part of their brain. It's actually still there, but it's missing. But they're creating all the sensations, and the phantom limb could hurt, have pains and aches. It could actually have sensations. And they found that after you lose an arm, other parts of your brain start to remap into that. So sometimes when people have lost their arm, they will touch them on the cheek or face, and they will actually feel it on their phantom limb. Right? So a touch here, they would feel there. And they've even done experiments where they've touched like a dummy hand, like they've made a fake hand that's not theirs, but they're looking in this mirror-like device, so it seems like it's there, and they've touched it and they felt it. Like, I can feel that. Well, first of all, you don't even have that hand, right? But you are feeling it. I'm not even touching anything, right? I'm not even touching you. I'm just touching a fake hand, but you're feeling it in your head. The VR and AR, you could actually be feeling devices, touches. I could be shaking your hand. We could be feeling these things, all created within our heads. This is how amazing our minds are. It blows me away, right? How amazing our minds are, that all of reality, in essence, is being created in our minds. All we are doing is, we are the equivalent of a robot getting input, but then the reality is created in our heads. So, as soon as we start to really understand the mind and how to interface with the mind, you can imagine the potential here. It's the potential to merge the real world with a virtual or augmented world, and with other people's memories and minds and thoughts and all of society into one continuous reality. Reality flows at us, right? It would just be a whole new reality that we would be entering. You would even be able to live outside your body. So what do I mean by that? Well, right now, we live in our bodies. We think our bodies are who we are. But as I said, if somebody loses their arm, they now can create a fabricated arm, artificial arm. They can hook it up to your nerves, and then the person will feel like that's their real hand. They will tell you, oh my God, they're doing this now in laboratories. It's actually, these are real. And they put sensors in there so that the artificial arm they can touch, and they will feel like it's really them. Like, oh, this is my, and then the phantom arm will go away. And this new arm will be remapped into their brain. And all the pain and stuff they felt with their phantom arm is gone. So it's like transformative for these people. Well, they have actually done research in labs today where I read this book on brain. It's amazing. If you go to my blog on Founderspace, you'll see a lot of these books that I read. So if you're fascinated by the subject, go there. I have a section of book reviews, and I have lots of books I post up there. So they've done experiments where somebody, they have actually, a neurosurgeon did an experiment where people actually were touched. They were touched on their hand, but when they weren't seeing their hand, they were seeing like a table being touched in exactly the same pattern as their hand. So somebody's touching their hand and then somebody's touching the table, and the person thought that the table, they were the table. They felt like they were the table, like the table was them. That's what they thought. Their brain all of a sudden. So your brain is that malleable. It can change that much. So what I'm saying is the brain is used to saying, if I see something and feel something, I'm going to correlate them. So we could have artificial appendages put onto us, and our brain, if we start seeing the input coordinated, will start to feel like they're and we get, even with, this table wasn't getting sensory, but they were getting it, right? If there's some sensory input, these artificial appendages will become us. And these artificial appendages don't actually have to even be connected to our body. So it could be other things in the room, and we're getting direct feedback into our brain through, one of these brain devices from that thing, and whatever it's feeling, we would be feeling. So if it's pressure sensitive or touch sensitive or light sensitive or heat sensitive, we could be feeling what that little robot is feeling. And that robot, in essence, would be an extension of who we are. Yes?
Isn't that just like a recreation of a feeling or emotion that we've already experienced? So like, same with like the phantom limb syndrome, like, yes, they remember what it feels like, so they trigger that thought, and that's why they feel it. So if you're doing the same thing,
I don't know if it's just memory. It's actually being created. Our brains are designed to create that. They are designed to create these feelings. They are generated inside the mind. They are getting input, yes, from the outside, but the sensation isn't just a memory. Remember, every memory you have is being recreated.
Yeah.
It isn't what you really had. It's actually being born the second you remember it. And it's always different because of that.
Right.
So I think it would be like a memory, yes, but the memory isn't what we often think it is, like we're pulling up a picture or a little movie. It's actually something being created in real time. So we will be creating these in real time. So you can imagine yourself being transported through this device. Let's say there's a rover on Mars, right? Elon Musk puts down a robot on Mars. Elon Musk doesn't have to send people. We can actually inhabit those, potentially with the right interface on our brain. We could actually inhabit those robots and be walking around on Mars, right? Experiencing it, feeling the inputs and all the different stuff just being translated, communicated directly back into our brain in a format that our brain understands. So the amazing thing is, I could potentially look through the eyes of a robot. I could look through your eyes. We could create, so I see what you see as you walk. Oh, you're in Africa. I want to inhabit you, right? You give me permission, I'm in you, and I'm walking through Africa, feeling within your range of permissions what you're allowing me to access. I could potentially start to understand the world in new ways. So our eyes see a relatively small spectrum of the magnetic field out there, right? Very limited, what we see. We could expand our visual range dramatically, seeing infrared, ultraviolet, all these different wavelengths, and like bats, sonic, can get sonic feedback. We could get all these different inputs that like insects and other animals are able to have, and even beyond what animals are capable, what any machine could measure, could be translated into us, and then it starts to become, instead of having 5 senses, I may have 6, 7, 8, 9. These are what cyborgs will do. And we attach new types of senses to our body, or we have extensions of our body in the form of robots or other things moving out there that are giving us feedback. So it's just absolutely mind-boggling when, our whole conception of reality will have to alter. We all kind of have this common sense of what reality is, but it's really a sliver of what is real. Because what is real to us, what's a bat scene, is a totally different version of the same room and space and everything else. Yes?
So I'm curious, how much time do you think that you and the people that you talk with about this stuff, the people who are working on this stuff, are discussing and thinking about how to prevent these different types of technologies from being used by governments to...
Okay, my next slide, I'll move forward. So, experience other lives, I went into that. Let's talk about this, okay? Since you want to talk about it. Everybody's excited about hacking, So, hacking, the scary part is, and it is scary, that once you open up your mind, you could, it's bad enough if our cell phone gets hacked or our bank account, somebody steals our identity, right, online. They could steal your real identity. They could steal what is you, They could erase you and reprogram you. Or they could simply control you without you ever realizing they were controlling you. If they had direct access into your brain, whether it's a government, whether it's an individual, whether it's a group or whatever, it is scary. How do you put safeguards? How do you even know once your brain is tapped into that you aren't being controlled? We all might become schizophrenics, right? Paranoid schizophrenics. Right? I'm being controlled, because you would never know if it were real or not. And maybe we're all being controlled right now. We just don't know it, right? And those people running down the street saying, I'm being controlled, my mind is being read, they're the ones who got it.
Every marketer's dream is to control everyone. That's what
and marketing. No, so, this is my last slide, but I'll back up a little bit. It's heaven and hell, right? And the reason I say it's heaven and hell is because we can see these worst nightmare cases, which are just god-awful, right? And then there's also, I want to point out the heaven, because we want to have, don't want to just skew it in one direction. The heaven is if you read all the great books on philosophy and religion, and whether it's Buddhist texts, Hindu, Muslim, Christianity, doesn't matter, all of them point to heaven as actually losing yourself, right? And becoming a part of a greater God, or a greater, whether it's nirvana, whether it's enlightenment, leaving everything behind, whether it's, the Christian heaven that you enter into and you connect with God and you are, in the presence of God, and all human beings are in that presence. All of us are isolated beings right now. I mean, we have our relationships, but we never feel what other people feel. We're never connected. We're still trapped inside our own heads. But in the future, we actually could create devices that allow us to connect with all of humanity. So all of humanity could become one greater organism, working together directly, exchanging knowledge and feelings, and it could be, on the positive side, a very mystical and enlightening whole new experience that approximates, transcendence. That's great. Now, on the same side, if it's used to nefarious purposes, it might be hell, right? Where we're all controlled and we all become these drones of some greater power. And maybe even mindless, where we have no control over them. Well, what will happen, I guess, is one of the reasons that it makes me want to give this talk. Because I think it's up to all of us what direction we take this technology and how it's used. So one of the things that inspired me is well, we should start talking about this now. We should start thinking about this. Because, you know, I pretty much think it's inevitable, whether it happens in 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, or even sooner, this technology is going to happen. We're going to figure this out. This isn't beyond the realm of possibility. So, how are we going to use it, and how is it going to impact our lives? There are a couple slides I skipped. You know, basically, once our heads are connected to the internet, what I wanted to say here is that each of us becomes a node in the internet. We're already kind of like a node, right? You know, people can't leave their cell phone, they can't turn it off. But we become really a node of the internet. And you know, and like I said, you know, with permissions and things, how do we control it? You know, I recently turned off all my notifications on my phone. Every notification I have. Why? Because I found I couldn't have decent conversations. I couldn't do my writing, which I like to do, or deep thinking, because there's always so tempting. I'd see the little red circle with, you know, I'd have to go in there and like answer that thing. So I just turned it off, and now whenever I feel like it, I'll go check my email or my instant messenger, but I will do it on my own schedule instead of having it control me. We kind of have to think about that, especially as these new technologies really start to invade our life more deeply, become more deeply integrated with our life. Yes?
On that note, I'm still curious to hear, I guess, the answer to my next question. How much time do you and other people studying this stuff and discussing it discuss specifically how you're going to try to prevent these tools from being used by governments? And
So how much time do we spend on that?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, most people spend too little time. You know, I don't see a lot of discussion about that. Most academics kind of are interested in the science, right? So they spend most of their time trying to figure out what is possible. Most entrepreneurs tend to be interested in the business opportunity. So they're figuring.
Do you see evidence that people even care about it?
I think all of us care about it to some degree.
Because I think a lot of people just don't.
Well, they don't think about it, right? They would care if they thought a lot about it, but it hasn't become a major. I haven't read about a lot of discussions on this, although I'm sure they're happening in groups like we're having today. But I felt like inspired enough to actually, one of the reasons I wanted to do this talk was to have this type of discussion. You know, should we start talking about this? I think so. Is it going to be a real issue, a moral issue, a sociological issue, a political issue? All of these, it'll affect everything, right? Everything. We do and think and are, like our whole identities, and the whole human race, right? We're taking basically evolution into our own hands. You know, we're doing it with this, we're doing it with new technologies like CRISPR DNA editing. And when you combine those new technologies and artificial intelligence, so if you have artificial intelligence, a brain, MindTech, and then you also have DNA editing, where we're actually now capable of our genes are genetic code, right? We're capable now of reprogramming our genes to create new species of plants and animals, and new species of sapiens beyond humans. You combine all of that, it's a huge transformation. We're just at the beginning. So when is the time we should be talking about it? Right now. But what effective steps could we take? You know, who's going to legislate what's moral and immoral? You know? And yes.
Well, that's the question I worry about. Is, well, who's going to legislate? Is if legislation is the solution, that's actually like giving more power to the government.
Yeah, it might not be the solution, but then
that we're in jeopardy of being controlled by if this technology really gets out there. I think it has to be engineered to be controllable from the bottom up by the individual. Like right now, there's this troubling trend of putting more and more data into the cloud instead of people owning the data on their personal devices and controlling it. They work on this stuff remotely. Well, that means somebody else is controlling your data. And when you start getting brain chips and stuff, if you're doing that in the cloud, you know,
which you will be.
Your brain is in the cloud, and then you really have lost control. So I'd like to see a trend away from the cloud towards giving people more individual autonomy. Like all these permissions, you know.
Nobody pays attention.
Permissions on my phone because you always want to, you know, look at everybody's address book, be able to send tweets for you.
I know. So the problem we're going to face is that the utility of all these devices right? The utility. Once everybody else starts adopting this brain technology, and you're like, wow, you learned Spanish in a week? I want to try that, you know? The utility factor, or you can, you know, just talk to people by thinking. It will be so enticing that people, again, I'm afraid we're just going to go down the same path we did with social networks, where people are like, whatever, you know? Whatever, they're going to use my data. These companies are going to use my data, but I can't live without this. I have to have it.
So what are you going to choose as an opinion leader in this area?
What?
I said, what are you going to choose?
Oh, what am I going to choose?
Yeah.
You know, it's very interesting. Human beings are group animals, right? We are not, we think of ourselves, especially in the US, as individuals. But you go to many other cultures and they don't even think that. They think more like we're the group. But even in the US, even though we think of ourselves as individuals, we're just more individualistic. We are still, everything we do as a group. They've done many psychological studies on this. Even how our morality is formed is based on the morality that we see around us. People's morals are very flexible, and they will do what they see people around them doing. And they've done all these psychological tests where if they see all the other people cheating, people will cheat. It's just that simple. They will, but if they see other people don't cheat and they're told that it's wrong, then they will stop. Depending on what the group around them is doing. What I think will happen, honestly, is technology. We've unleashed technology. Technology is kind of this one-way road. I don't see anybody able to turn it off. It's sort of like once you invent the atomic bomb, it's here to stay, right? Whether we like it or not, having atomic weapons, they're here, and they are part of our existence. Now we're inventing these new technologies. They're going to be here, and we're going to have to figure out how to deal with them. Governments will have their ways of doing it. Individuals will be able to make their choices. Society as a whole will make its choice. A lot of what we depend, I think, we have to have these deep discussions now to decide what we allow to happen and what we don't. And how much choice will we have, and who does the power reside with? Like you said, you don't trust the government. You don't want it to reside with the government. Well, the government, for all the stuff to happen that I described, the good and the bad, it doesn't require the government at all. It can all happen with private companies and individuals.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that is where the innovation's happening and going to happen.
Yeah.
Governments have so much power that they'll be in a position to step in and control it unless the people developing the technology really have strong consciousnesses, and they're going to, even if they get that order from the NSA or the FBI or whatever, saying disclose all the information you have about these people and don't tell them that we asked you for it, by the way. They have to have the courage to stand up and resist that and risk.
It depends on the type of government they have. In a democracy, right now, if we're able to keep a strong democracy, we have a lot of freedom to resist. In other countries around the world, it's not the same. Like, it doesn't matter if you have great morals. If the government says they want it, the government has it.
Well, you guys know 17 in the world's freedom ranking that just came out.
Okay, so we're not the best, but we have Trump, so I'm sure we went down a few notches, in my opinion. But that's just my personal politics. You don't have to agree. But the bottom line is a lot of countries are a lot worse. And so governments will get a hold of this. There's just no doubt. Yeah, there's just no doubt. And they're going to use it however that government sees fit.
Well, I mean, the trend right now is to go to the blockchain technology to remove the centralized...
That's only happening because governments are allowing it. So in China, they shut it down. Totally. And it's you can only do what the government says there.
No, you're talking about the crypto money.
Yeah,
I'm talking of the technology blockchain who distribute the data, and nobody
can control
centralized control. That's happening not just for the money; it's happening everywhere.
It can happen everywhere.
So that's
But there's always. I don't think technology can protect us against the government. I honestly don't because I've seen it.
Government is us.
No. Well, here
Well, some technology has helped protect us. I mean, cell phone video cameras, I think, have been a very empowering tool for people to fight back against police abuse.
No, we can use it. We have to use the tech. I guess what I'm saying is the technology itself can't do it. It's how we use it. But at the end of the day, those police videos only work because in our country we're allowed to show those and share those without getting in trouble, right? We're allowed to speak out about police violence. If we were not allowed to speak out about police violence, people would be afraid to share those videos because they would be locked up. So in that situation, that technology wouldn't be effective.
But to your point, from spreading it,
Yeah, I'm just saying.
But the idea of this is the idea of a hive mind, right?
Yeah.
Is collective enlightenment.
Yeah.
The weakest link becomes equal to the strongest link, and so I would argue that ignorance and people acting out of profound confusion is largely what's to blame for people's misinformed decisions about life, or voting, or whatever you want to talk about. Long story short, collective exchange.
See, that's a great
ideas
idea right there.
will actually change entirely what China looks like and what their government would look like, potentially.
Potential.
Because the ideas are viral.
Potential.
Yeah.
So all around the world, these are issues that, look, I'm for personal freedom. I don't rely on technology to give us that freedom. I think fundamentally that freedom has to come from a political structure. That the technology won't save us from governments. If we have an open, free government that allows free speech and allows us to use technology to expose corruption and other things, then the technology is great. If we don't, the reverse is true. Like that, those technologies, and the blockchain included, will be used by the government in the way that the government wants. You don't believe that? No. Well, I can guarantee you, it's like the case. You can.
Sounds like a wager.
Yeah. No, but the blockchain is free, is allowed to operate because it's allowing it to operate. If the SEC wanted to, if the government wanted to shut down the blockchain, they could shut it down. What?
China owns like 51% of the mining farms, and when you own 51% of the Bitcoin network, you can start doing manipulations.
You can do all sorts of things.
With the algorithms.
Yeah, they're just algorithms. They're just code. It's not like magic. It's just code. They're plugged into networks. Look, I travel a lot all around the world, and I see, I go to China, everything is monitored in China. All your WeChat, all your communications. And if you speak out there, which I don't, because I would never be allowed back in the country.
Or they'd hunt you down and not let you out.
No, they'd let me out.
Really?
Yeah, but because I'm an American
People
citizen.
disappearing sometimes.
No. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. No, honestly, it's not,
Yes,
all
I read it late at night on the internet.
all I'm saying is that we live in a different political climate. And if you live in another political climate, you would see how much control the government can exert. And those technologies aren't the defense. They can be a defense if you're in a free society that allows you to use them effectively. That's just my belief from everything I've seen. Yeah.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, and one thing we're seeing what's happening, I agree with you, but one observation this is made in the book, it's distributing power, right? We saw Twitter and Arab Spring.
It's
both
distributing and consolidating at the same time. We use one filter to browse the entire world internet, right? All the information in the world. Everybody uses Google.
Yeah.
Right? Now Google is a filter. Well, not everybody, but I would say, okay, 99% of people in the US use Google. Now, it's never everybody. But most people, right, is forming the consensus of what people think. Now, Google has an algorithm, and the algorithm is essentially filtering out what you see, right? It's putting the search results it thinks are good. Facebook has filters, They are filtering out your news feed and deciding what news goes. And now their filters are going to be more active because of the fake news thing. They're going to be taking an active role in all those things. Before, Facebook actually turned down their filters because people were accusing Facebook of discriminating against Republicans. So they took down a lot of the political filters, and that's why that fake news was allowed to blossom. Now they're actually going the opposite direction. But what I'm saying is that a lot of what we have is both consolidating around these mega corporations, right? And at the same time, we do have the internet. You can get other information, and there are other sources. But then if you go to a country like China, you cannot access those other sources. It's much harder. And if they want to turn off the VPNs, virtual private networks, they can do it like that. It really, all I'm saying is that, well, it requires all of us to be vigilant, you know, and think about the choices we make. Like you said, do you want to use Google? Now, right now, I think Google is a pretty benevolent company, right? That is genuinely looking out for our interests. But over time, Google could, the founders of Google won't be around forever. It will turn into another company. And will it be as benevolent? Well, if they aren't, they have a huge amount of power over the information we consume and the opinions that are formed. You know, it's a big issue to discuss, but I think it's a really important one. Yeah.
It also gets into the discussion of like whether people really do have free will. Like,
oh yeah, that's a whole other
like,
thing.
It is one thing to say that, okay, well, there's one system or one government that controlling what can be accessed, but in the U.S., sure, people have that access, but do people really use their rights to access rightfully? Like, are they really looking out for opposite opinions and trying to understand different belief systems? No, people we see like from Twitter patterns, people just converge towards what they believe in. And
right, a lot of people are forming these niche groups, whether it's like a white supremacist group,
right,
where they're all reinforcing each other's beliefs, right? No matter, you know, no matter how antisocial those are.
It's the same in every spectrum of the population. It's not just the white supremacists, it's also on the liberal.
Oh yeah, I know.
The echo chambers are everywhere.
Oh, I know. Yeah, and in a way we've gotten more echo chambers because of the internet.
Yeah.
Because all of us are allowed to filter out everything we don't want to hear and get all these sources that confirm our biases that we already have.
Yeah.
Because it makes us feel good, right? And we feel part of a group when we do that. How does that change? How do we change that?
And I think the other part that's challenging with any technology is like the emergent behavior. Like an iPhone is a novelty. When one person has it, it's kind of like a mini club when 1,000 have it. But when 1 billion people have it, you get a complex system. And complex systems, like you know, have this behavior that you can't ever like extrapolate from analyzing a piece of technology. Like you know, the birth of the iPhone created the potential for online dating, which fundamentally sort of changed the way human beings meet one another. You could have never guessed that just breaking down the iPhone. So
right, you can't.
So you can't. So what I'm saying is, right now the speculation is challenging because these things will create emergent behaviors and ripples that can then seep over into other disciplines, and it just creates this soup of creativity and innovation and unpredictability and chaos theories, essentially.
Right. And the one good thing is, I think one of our defenses, maybe to what you were talking about, I wasn't trying to shut you down because you have really good ideas. So excuse me if I was passionate in my responses. I really like what you're saying. I just have my own opinions, right? But you know, it's really interesting. If we have these dialogues about how is right to use a technology, how it's wrong to use a technology, and we have open discussions, the chances are, and we police through our actions. Like if there's a company out there that isn't using technology responsibly, we stop using them, right? And we organize and we get out the word to switch to another one. Well,
no, come on, the world's full of lemmings. And who's to say that is right? And there was a sentence when I first came in.
I'm trying to be positive here.
It's positive to be a lemming.
No, I'm saying having...
When I first came in, you said something about how people are happy. We actually have no choice. You know, the algorithms have been set up so that we're sort of swept together. I mean, you have to be a real radical to have choice about who is going to come to you at the internet.
I mean, what you're saying, there's truth there. Yes. Yeah. No, so a lot of people do. I mean, I was talking earlier about how we're group animals. I was already...
So sorry I missed it.
how we tend to go in groups and do things in groups. I was trying to counterbalance that by saying that one of the best defenses we can have is to have these discussions and to act on our beliefs.
Yeah, work together.
Yeah, that was my main point. So,
Choose freedom over convenience.
what?
Choose freedom over convenience.
Yes,
That's
right, over convenience, right? Most people are now choosing convenience, right? We all do Facebook and all these other things. Yes.
So
Yeah.
if you cannot stand the notification on your phone
Yeah.
right now, so why do you want an implant in
Oh, I didn't say I want any of this. My whole point is that it's coming. Like, I'm just telling you, like, this isn't, I'm not like, I told you it fascinates me, right? The technology fascinates me because it is coming, and it is something we need to think of. Do I want it? Well, I think I feel a lot probably like you do, right? Part of me says, wow, that's amazing, and part of me, wow, that's terrifying. Both those feelings, yeah. And how will we integrate this technology into our lives and society?
Well, I think this
Yeah.
is already an exobrain. You can talk to it.
Oh, I know. It's very hard.
And
I
it's
can't.
connected. So all the stuff you've described in terms of
Right. This.
hives or
Right. This is the precursor.
Right.
But when it's directly tapped
Yeah, so
into,
it's worse.
yeah, it's way right. It's either way worse or way better, right? Utility-wise, it's way better, right? It's going to be seamless.
No, we don't know.
But yeah, impact on our lives could be way worse.
One thing that's been said though is technology, like we're evolving our technology, but there's clearly a co-evolution, like technology is evolving us. So one thing I would hope is when this stuff becomes fully big and mature, we might not be the same humans at that point that we are.
See, this is the eternal optimist. I love you, okay?
Cautiously, the optimist because Ray Kurzweil and the guys that work at Google build an AI say we should be cautiously optimistic, so I defer to them.
Yeah, no, but I agree. Well, you know, the title of this was Neosapiens, right? We will not, throughout history, we have been Homo sapiens. We are entering a new phase now where we will become a new type of creature with these brain implants, direct communication with the internet, huge cloud-based AIs, robots all around us. All these technologies coming into play right now. DNA editing, so we can reshape, we can design our babies. They can be smarter, they can have no cancer, they can have all these features we don't have. All of this is coming now, and as a new species, maybe like you're saying, as a new species, we'll be able to deal with this in a better way than we have in the past. Yeah, we hope so, right? Because our history isn't that pretty. If you read a lot of our history. Human beings are not the most noble creatures on Earth. Like if you ask all the other species on the planet, most of which are disappearing now at an alarming rate, have we been good caretakers of other species? They would say, you guys have been the monsters, right?
Like this the only mass extinction that the humans triggered, the sixth one that we're in right now?
Well, no, there's been, the only ones that human has triggered.
Yeah.
We've had 5 others triggered by, natural
Now
disasters.
we can join that club.
But now, and we're only accelerating it in the United States, apparently. Like right now, like all on coal and oil, it's crazy. It's like we're going it's so obvious what's happening, and we're doing the opposite of what. So we have not been great caretakers. So if this technology comes out, which it will we be capable of controlling it in the sense of keeping the worst sides of humanity from using it in bad ways? I don't know, but we should start organizing now. Yeah.
The biggest extension I see from a lot of these discussions is that if you look at general humanity, the average person shouldn't be allowed to make decisions on this because they're not good at it. So when you think about democratizing a lot of
frame
this,
of mind, right?
there's a certain expertise that's required to understand it, to form an opinion, and to give that opinion.
Well,
So if we just have the voting system, we're going to be making bad decisions.
How could you
So
say
not-
that with our
neither of those-
how could you
neither
say
of
that
those
with
are
our
good
current
answers,
president?
right?
How could you say that?
That's our king approach, yes.
What?
Who's president? It's not my president. If we all decide this, we can have autonomy from the bottom up.
Yeah.
You don't have to use Google, you don't have to be on Facebook, you know, there's plenty of other social networks out there.
DuckDuckGo is great, by the way.
Yeah, DuckDuckGo.
What's your point in asking that question?
What? Which he asked the question.
Which question?
You said, can we do his point, considering our current president? So in a
No,
way-
he was saying he doesn't. I was joking. So he said basically, you know, we shouldn't have people
think
vote on this
collectively
because
make decisions.
the mass of humanity does not tend to make the best decisions. And that was your point.
In a computer place, we're having that conversation? I mean,
In a computer place.
Comes down to the ethics of it though, like how we actually perceive it, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like the whole conversation is computer ethics and what we're willing and what we're not willing to do. So that ties no matter what in the technology is like, how do we handle it? Where do we go from here? And what we can do right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
What can we do now?
yeah.
What can we do now? And then, you know, to your point, should we have an anointed group of intellectuals making these decisions? Or should we put it up to the greater democracy?
It's the market right now that's
Yeah.
deciding. It's not even a democracy, it's the
Yeah.
market.
It certainly isn't the intellectual class.
Yeah, it's eventually gonna be the technologies.
What?
Intellectual classes, that's a market. They're at Google right now.
It is, it will, no, because we have an open capitalist system.
We do?
Well, to a certain degree, right?
Well, any degree is some degree, 1% is some degree, right? I mean,
Well, it is corporations
the corporate is-
and entrepreneurs who
Look at
are,
like Elon Musk, libertarian, Ayn Randian type individual, single-handedly evolving humanity and showing what's possible. A lot of them are sort of this like, you know, Jeff Bezos, he bought Whole Foods, he started his own healthcare company, because he's just like, if the government won't do it, you know, I'll try to affect change. And so he's trying to feed people like organic food by cutting Whole Foods prices, trying to roll out healthcare. It's a bit libertarian, but to your point, yeah, it's the market that's doing the stuff that the government's impotent over.
so, you know, there's no perfect system, right? There's no perfect government system in the world, never has been. I don't think there will be, but there are better systems than others. I tend to, you know, for all of democracy's flaws, the beauty of democracy and having free speech, the beauty of having an open system where we can criticize the government and where we can affect change is that if we go in a wrong direction, we have a chance to change it. That's why I wouldn't give up democracy even for an elite class of people who might make better decisions. I still wouldn't give it up.
The correct answer, I think, is somewhere along that spectrum. Right?
Yes. Now, should we give a bigger voice to people who are thinking deeply about this? A bigger voice to people who can, you know, not just use hyperbole and rhetoric to, to skew public opinion? Should there be a way, and should we have our media doing that? Absolutely. I would like to see that. I think people like Jeff Bezos are actually quite thoughtful, you know, and quite doing good. Like he bought the Washington Post. You know, all our newspapers are now going out of business. Thank God he bought that one that can do investigative journalism, because most can't afford it, right?
They can afford Whole Foods now too, thanks to the acquisition.
Yeah, they were going down too.
Where he acquired them and slashed their prices.
I know that's his whole model, right?
Yeah.
But
Slash prices on the bulk. I mean, you're in this room, wake up.
you're hilarious. So,
I am.
and I love your glasses and your hair. It's perfect. I got to take a picture with you after.
Yes, together.
Yeah, of course.
Right, I don't know who you are, but sure.
Yeah, you don't know how. You just showed up here. And you missed the talk, but you're coming for the discussion. That's fine. No, but this is fun for me. Like, I love doing this. Just so you know, I care very deeply about these issues. I want our country to be better. I want technology to be used more responsibly. I'm very worried about a lot of the same things you are. I actually recently launched a website, which I hope to do more with. It's called defendyourdemocracy.com. It's just brand new. And if you want to go there, you can sign up. But I'm going to do some events which are more on the political side of how do you defend democracy, right? How do you create a richer, more vibrant democracy that would curb corruption, curb abuse of these technologies, because I think that's really important to our society, and I think we need to start doing that.
Decentralized power so it can't be abused.
What?
Decentralized power so it can't be abused by large concentrations of it being in the same hands.
Well, a reading of history, the long arc of human history is towards a gentler, kinder, freer society. You know, like if you, so my general guarded optimism, you go into the wild card of tech, the general history indicates that we should have no reason to question the trajectory. With the growing pains of a World War III or something catastrophic. It's actually happening, and then we have to rebuild a new world.
So I want to believe that too, and I will tell you that our quality of life due to technology is far better than it was. Like, it was brutal, like in the Middle Ages. I mean, you lived a short, nasty life usually.
27 was old age.
What?
27 was considered old age.
Yeah.
People didn't make it to 30.
You could. They have the same potential to make it to 80, but one disease would wipe you out.
And
You know?
childbirth too.
Life
Yeah,
expectancy, child mortality, and birth rate. On every metric we've gotten better.
On every metric, we've gotten better.
Yeah.
And they had completely different rods and cones in their eyes. I mean, why look back?
No, but all I'm saying is the long arc of history is there, but I don't want to just leave it up to that, right? I think all of us need to be active, take action to do that. Yes?
So sorry if I change the topic a little bit.
Yeah.
You're in the startup world,
Yeah.
I'm curious from your eyes. What are some of the killer use cases? Those are all interesting, futuristic pictures that you painted, but like, what are some immediate use cases that allow entrepreneurs getting into the space to build not nice to have products, but really good products? Or
Using brain tech or what
right.
tech? Which?
Brain technology.
Okay, brain tech.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like your whole topic. Right?
So, I think a lot in the early phases of this, I think consumer is going to be hard. It's going to be hard to create super compelling consumer applications because the technology is still too crude. But I think if you focus on business-to-business enterprise products, such as medical, and pick out really high value as an entrepreneur problems that people are having, and apply this brain technology towards those, that's where you're going to see the greatest return in the near future, like if you're starting today. So if you can use this brain technology, like I was saying, to help post-traumatic stress disorder, right? To help people deal with that and the biofeedback, to help people deal with phobias and things like phobias, to help people deal with learning, people with learning disabilities, to help them learn better. Right, areas like that, if I were an entrepreneur today, I would pick one of those and go really deep and start to understand how can I take this new, so most of my talks, aren't like this, more general, most are very specific towards entrepreneurs, but you would figure out like, okay, I think entrepreneurs that are looking back at old technology are making a mistake. It's very hard to break through with an old technology because most of the low-hanging fruit has been exploited, right? People have taken those ideas and tried everything easy, and you have to think really hard to come up with a new application. But new technologies like the blockchain, which I am a fan of, and new technologies like MindTech, you can look for real problems in society and in business that you can go in and solve with these. So if you're an entrepreneur, I'd pick something that you're kind of passionate about, like if something that you really think is passionate about, and then you start to go talk to the people who are suffering from that, and figure out what solutions they have, and see, is it possible to build a vastly superior solution, or even if there's no solution, to build a solution that they don't have to those problems, and that's where I would start. Now, specifically, if you had ideas and you want to bounce them off me, I could give you my specific feedback.
Have you seen any startups that are going along this direction? Because according to you, a lot of those technology components are getting more ready for such a breakthrough.
Yeah, so they are, like in the MindTech space,
Yeah.
well, I've seen ones who use the EEG, non-invasive
Right.
brain technology, to do, like I said, I gave you a few examples at the beginning.
Oh, like meditation,
Yeah,
concentration.
it can be used for meditation, it can be used for concentration and learning, it can be used for post-traumatic stress disorder, it can be used for lots of different things like that. And it can be used for psychological disorders.
Right.
Are there other applications? I'm sure there are. I can start to imagine it, right? Like you could do focus group. You know when they do focus group, like you have a new product or an app and you're using it, if you put on an EEG thing and could read their brain waves, you know, a lot of times people will say one thing, but they're actually reacting differently. If you could start to correlate their brain waves with what they're really thinking, you could know what their real experience of testing your app is, or watching a movie as a focus group and giving feedback. All of these, so they're.
That's not a bottom-up empowering line of research.
Right.
No, my job wasn't to answer what's empowering at this point. I'm just being a practical entrepreneurial question with a practical
I'm trying to be a little
entrepreneurial.
bit confrontational because I think that really to succeed and have this kind of stuff lead to a positive future, it means that people like yourself, to be really blunt, have to get out of that practical entrepreneurial mindset to a certain degree and start thinking about, you know, how am I engineering these tools? Am I engineering them in a way that's going to lead to more bottom-up freedom and individual control, or am I going to engineer them in a way that's going to lead to more top-down institutional authoritarian control that can take us down a really dystopian path?
Well, you have to do it.
He speaks
I'm
for
not a
me.
technical, I'm an activist. I'm actually
Yeah.
interested
So you're
in
an-
finding out from you where I can get involved in conversations with the people that are doing the research on this kind of stuff, because I'd like to be part of those conversations as a layperson having that outside perspective.
Okay, so this is one. So I brought together a random group of people, some from the entrepreneurial side, others from the political activist side, all together, right, to actually discuss these big ideas. And I think all of your questions are relevant. So I think it's very relevant to ask straightforward entrepreneurial questions about what are the opportunities for a business person. And I think it's also very relevant to ask what are the bigger issues we should be dealing with. I find both fascinating, and I think
His is the seed issue. And the way he expressed it, excuse me, I'm your lawyer for like a minute. The way he expressed it was, if we don't look at that aspect, all the other things will bring us difficulties. But he said it differently. We have to look at the seed aspect.
I understand.
Project.
So
And he's saying things that are very different than what you're saying.
I understand, yes. And I respect that. I think it's great. I think we need that.
Kurzweil is a real guy. He gives a great hug. He's been with the same wife all his life. He lives in the same house. You can't use him as an example in modern society.
Ray Kurzweil?
Yeah.
He's a futurist, he's a leading development
Yeah.
in these topics.
Really, he gives a great hug.
Okay, I didn't know that, okay? But I've read his books. I didn't know he's a great hugger. I'll go hug him. But I love these discussions, and I like having many different points of view. So it's really good.
I'm sure you're a good hugger too, Steve.
I am a good hugger. I try to be. And I actually try to embody, I try to look at the world from, one of my things is to look at the world from multiple perspectives. So I really try hard to look at the world from an activist point of view and understand that. I really try hard to look at the world from a strictly entrepreneurial point of view. I try to look at the world from a political point of view. And I think all of those help me understand the world a little better. I try to look at the world from a Republican point of view, a Democratic point of view, all sorts of different points. I think once you do that, you start to understand, like my brother is a diehard Republican, right? And I tend to be more on the liberal side. So, we have discussions, and it's really important to keep an open mind to what other people are thinking and why they're thinking it. Because just because I don't like certain things they do doesn't mean all their ideas are wrong. And that's something our country has become very polarized around, and it's basically us just saying, you know, everything somebody else who doesn't have my worldview, you know, is just totally 100% wrong. And that's where a lot of learning and progress breaks down. And then you just get into more ideology, and people are just shouting at each other. And I think that's very hard to make progress. So there's a lot of people who are libertarians. Libertarians have some good ideas. They have some ideas I don't agree with. But I think, you know, for me, I think having these open discussions is important. I want to do more of them. So, like I said,
Unless they're crazy people who want to shout at each other, use their energy that way. You can just walk around them. You know, I mean, this is a place for us to meet one another.
Thank you. Thank you. So, any other questions before we wrap it up?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So back to your issue about
Yeah.
notification.
Yeah.
And overload of information and distraction. Do you know any companies or startups in your portfolio or in the company you look at or who are addressing those issues?
Which issues are these? Say that again.
Overload of notification.
Oh, an overload of
distractions,
information. Yes, so there's a lot of people who have are talking about. There's books out now about it. There's a number of books about how to cut down on the information overload. I forget the names of all these books. We tend to, you know, Facebook cut down on it by having algorithms, right? That apparently they're picking what of your friends' posts you should see because there are just too many people, have too many friends doing too much posting. All of us go to different news sources as filters, you know, for our lives. But in terms of really personal, I think each of us just has to step back a minute and say, do I need it, right? Do I need this app?
That's easy to
It's easy to say?
Yeah.
It's hard to do?
It's super hard to do.
Yeah, I know.
It's an addiction. This is drugs.
It is.
You may be interested to look into the work of Tristan Harris. He is a friend and he started a movement exactly about this. I'll tell you the name. It's
Time well spent.
Yeah, but now it changed. Like, hold on, I'll tell you the name.
So this is what I've done in my life, if you just want to know personally. So, and I'm a techie, right? I've been in tech my whole life. I'm an entrepreneur. You know, I live and breathe this stuff, but I do try to control it. So, a couple things I do. So I turned off notifications on all my apps, so I just access them when I want to. They don't make me, aren't, you know, grabbing me and forcing me to respond to them. They're at my control. On my phone, I don't take voicemail messages anymore. It was just too overwhelming. And I didn't have time to respond to them, so I just tell people, you know, email me, I'll get back to you when I can. And then we can schedule a phone call if it's really important, you know? But I don't want just people, because I talk to thousands of people a year all around the world, I can't have all these people calling me every minute. So I did that. In my personal life, you know, I have kids. So like when we have a dinner with our family, we turn off all devices. We have time and we just talk. I also, with my kids, I limited them to what I call 1 hour media time a day, which sort of broke down the older they get, because once they get a phone, it's like impossible. Like, unless you want to be a dictator, you know, it's like impossible. But up until the time where they got phones, they would only get 1 hour to do whatever, a game or a movie, or, you know.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So I have a 35-year-old daughter, and
Yeah.
I recommend The Dictator. My daughter did not watch television unless she asked me and told me what it was until she was 13. And I recommend Being a Dictator. And you can meet her. I'll give you her name. You can go online and see. And she will tell you that she was glad that she grew up in a house where no was all that needed to be said.
It was a structure.
Yeah, well, that's basically what I'm saying. I mean, I limited them to 1 hour.
You're the adult.
Yeah, I did.
What do you mean they're telling you?
No, but after they get, they're over 13 now.
Well then you've done the best.
That's what I said, yeah. So when they got there, all their friends had cell phones before them. I was pulled it off, man. I was like, you are not getting a cell phone in middle school. You know, you are not getting, they're like, oh, my friends have these phones, and I like, do you really need one? Why do you need one? But as soon as they go to high school, forget it. Forget it, you know? Like, you would be a real jerk if you're not gonna give them a phone in high school. So the bottom line is, well, those are some of the ways I've done it, right? And then I try to spend my time.
My question was more on
and I try,
companies who provide a service for
a service.
Or,
Do people, I think you have to do it yourself.
That's what Google does.
huh?
Google simplifies the information for you.
They do, to a certain degree, right?
Here, that's good. Hi.
But at the end of the day, you have to do it for yourself. You have to decide what type of life. So another thing I do that works for me.
I'll give you an example. I have 5 different ways or 10 different ways to get communications.
Me too. I have like 10 different instant messengers. Like every country, I have WeChat, Kakao Talk, Line, WhatsApp.
So if you don't get the notification, you cannot talk to your friends, or you're not getting the information in time, and so forth. So there is something that has to be done.
I tell them if they want to reach me right away, email me.
Yeah.
That's my main primary source. I've narrowed it down.
Okay.
So they know if it's urgent, email me. And then
My question
I
was
check
more
once a day.
There is
What?
companies you know of that are addressing this.
No, I don't think there's
Technology
There have been, but I think they kind of lost out because at
They
some
did.
point, the trouble is that they start trying to make decisions for you, what's wrong with their report, and then if you disagree, you miss something, and eventually it doesn't really work very well. You end up having to do it yourself or get a PA or something.
Were you asking to get a business area?
There were businesses that would try to.
I totally agree. People don't like this.
Decide what to
People
do.
don't like that external. They weren't using them. They ended up being a hindrance.
I didn't try to do it, and at some point they make a mistake, you get upset.
Yeah, and then you're like, I don't want this.
People who are addicted to drugs, they like the drugs and they don't want to quit. So there's programs for them.
They have books and
there's a way to quit through a program.
I've heard of different groups.
That's what I'm asking. Is there?
I've heard of, I don't have the names, but you can look online. I've heard of groups where they go and you're supposed to put away your cell phone for a week and go into the mountains.
I was going to say, download Headspace and start practicing some meditation and mindfulness, and then you're just going to have to take it on yourself to change your own habits.
Yeah.
To expand on that, though, we're using EEG tech in order to help condition your brain in order to remove distractions, so you can better focus on the stuff.
Oh, you're doing this?
Yeah, so I think we have to
wow.
take a two-pronged approach. We have to work on ourselves upwards and then work on the media downwards.
Yeah, it's.
Sometimes
I think it's a real issue.
Sometimes you need tools to
Yeah, I know, to help you. Yeah, it's an addiction.
That's
Totally.
the
Totally. We need cell phones anonymous. You come in, I want to sell. I have been an addictive cell phone user.
Let's start it.
Let's help me. You can start it. How about that? I give you permission.
I have your slogan. There was a street guy in front of my building. I lived downtown, and I swear I overheard these exact words. He's talking to a buddy, and he says, "I used to do heroin, but then I quit about 8 years ago when I discovered the internet."
And he was serious?
Yeah. He was
No.
serious.
Love it.
He was
Must have been reading the New Yorker.
That is awesome. Well, I'm glad that worked for him. So I'm going to put my.
I'm sorry.
So if you want to email me, Captain Hoff, I may check once a day. Or Captain at Founderspace. If you want some of my video lectures or other things, you can go on to Founderspace. They're all up there.